Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point. The network is AFR Talk, the American Family Radio Talk Network. By the way, a great opening for God's Not Dead. We talked about this movie frequently last week. It premiered on Friday night, came in as the number 4 movie in the country, which is phenomenal because it opened on less than 800 screens. It was up against movies that were being released on as many as 3,000 screens. 3,000 theaters. It was playing on less than 800 screens. I believe its per screen take was higher than any other movie released this past weekend. So it came in 4th place. It made somewhere between $8-9 million for the opening weekend. So it's a big, big hit, particularly considering that religious-themed movies are considered not to have much of a chance in Hollywood. We had the privilege last week, as you remember, talking to Kevin Sorbo, the star, as well as the producer, David White. So it's gratifying to see this movie, a very faith-centric and family-friendly movie, do so well at the box office. You know, you hear all the time about the wonders of the Cuban healthcare system. This is the model. I mean, Michael Moore did an entire documentary about how vastly superior the Cuban healthcare system is to the American healthcare system. Well, get a load of this. This is from CNBC.com. Cuba is giving hundreds of thousands of medical workers raises that in some cases exceed 100%. Well, there you go. There is your medical paradise. There is your healthcare paradise. Look at Cuba. Look at the way a socialist, communistic, atheistic country takes care of its medical workers, takes care of the health needs of its people. Look at this. Isn't this wonderful? This is a healthcare paradise. Medical workers getting raises of 100%. Then you read down into the third paragraph at the high end. So this is the top of the pay scale now. At the high end, doctors with 2 specialties will see their salary go from the equivalent of $26 a month to $67 a month, while an entry-level nurse will make $25 a month, up from $13 a month. So there is your healthcare paradise. Doctors at the top end of the pay scale, 2 specialties, $67 a month. Nurses just now making $25 a month. Now I want to go back and close the loop, and then I want to get into my column, which is up at rightlyconcerned.com. It's also up at One News Now, our news site. But I just want to get back to the scientific definition of when life begins, because that's going to be a key issue in the Supreme Court's decision tomorrow. Now here is the HarperCollins Illustrated Medical Dictionary. An embryo, says the HarperCollins Illustrated Medical Dictionary, quote, is an organism in the earliest stage of development in a man from the time of conception to the end of the 2nd month in the uterus. So this is the Illustrated Medical Dictionary, authoritative source, that an organism in the earliest stages of development begins with conception, from the time of conception. Notice, not from the time of implantation, from the time of conception. Here is an excerpt from Langman's Medical Embryology, again, authoritative text in the field, out of the Princeton Library. The development of a human begins with fertilization, a process by which the spermatozoon from the male and the oocyte from the female, unite to give rise to a new organism, the zygote. Again, I repeat, the development of a human begins with fertilization, not with implantation. U.S. government, 1997 National Bioethics Advisory Commission on Cloning said this: an embryo is the developing organism from the time of fertilization until significant differentiation has occurred, when the organism becomes known as a fetus. So an embryo is the developing organism when from the time of fertilization. So what does science tell us? HarperCollins Illustrated Medical Dictionary, Langman's Medical Embryology, the U.S. government's National Bioethics Advisory Commission, unanimous: human life begins at conception. Human life begins at the moment of fertilization. So who's anti-science here? Barack Obama, Department of Justice. They are anti-science. Who's pro-science? Hobby Lobby. We believe that these these prescription medications like Plan B, like the Ella drug, that they can actually end the life of a human being in its earliest stage of development. And now we find out scientifically they are exactly right. So we're the pro-science ones. It's those on the left who are anti-science. Number to call if you want to join our conversation about all of this is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. And let me walk you through some of the highlights of the column. Again, it's up at our news site, onenewsnow.com. And I'm reacting to an editorial that appeared in the New York Times yesterday, which contradicted itself because as it argued for what I believe to be a flatly immoral and unconstitutional ruling from the Supreme Court. This is what they want. They want the Supreme Court to rule against Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby says our conscience compels us to protect innocent human life in the body of a woman, body of the mother. Some of these prescription drugs you are forcing us to buy for our employees will terminate a human life. We are opposed to that on principle. Our conscience will not allow us to do that. We cannot cooperate with this part of Obamacare, and the Supreme Court the New York Times wants the Supreme Court to impose its own moral view on Hobby Lobby. So oral arguments are going to be held tomorrow. They've set aside 90 minutes for this, which is unusual. Usually it's just 60 minutes, so they've expanded the time for oral arguments. So the question is whether Hobby Lobby's owners, against their will, against their conscience, and against their religious convictions, can be forced to provide abortion-causing drugs to their employees at their own expense. And remember, we just read these are abortions because it terminates the life of a human being at the earliest stage of development. We've got all these medical sources that support that view. Now, I think it's worth noting at the very outset that nobody who works for Hobby Lobby is being denied, quote, their right, end quote, to abortion-inducing contraceptives. They can still do it. If a Hobby Lobby employee wants to go out and do it on their own time with their own dime, they can still do it. Hobby Lobby is not trying to stop them in the least. They just do not want corporate resources to be used to kill babies. Now, you think about the number of corporations that will devote enormous amounts of money to protecting the environment. And we'll say, fine, you want to do it, that's fine. Well, if it's okay for corporations to use their money to protect the environment, it certainly ought to be permissible for other corporations to use their assets to protect human life. Now, the Times is out there saying, look, Hobby Lobby is imposing their religious views on their employees, and this is wrong. But they believe it's perfectly okay for the Supreme Court to impose their religious views on employers. So an employer cannot impose his religious and moral views on his employees, but it's okay for the Supreme Court to impose their religious views, their moral views on employers. So this is just hypocritical and self-contradictory and a monstrous double standard. Because look, if imposing religious and moral values on others is wrong, which is the position that the Times is taking, then it's wrong when anybody does it to anybody. So the court doesn't have any more ethical right to do this than anybody else. But this is what the Times wants the Supreme Court to do, to impose their own moral views on the sanctity of life on the owners of a private business. So the Times is completely blind to this glaring double standard. You know, according to their own value system, they want the Supreme Court to do something that is grossly immoral and unethical. So it's hypocritical, and it's an argument for abject tyranny. Because you compel a man to do something against his conscience, that is nothing more than tyranny. Now, the Times, along the way, they trivialize the financial impact of an adverse Supreme Court decision. Here's a quote from their editorial. Employers, says the Times, are not actually required to offer health plans. They could instead pay a tax to help support the government subsidies that are available to those using a health insurance exchange. Fine, except that tax, in the case of Hobby Lobby, amounts to $1.2 million a day. And the New York Times doesn't tell you that. They don't tell you that this tax, this penalty on Hobby Lobby, would amount to $1.2 million a day. This company would be bankrupt in a matter of weeks. Now, the Times is condescending. They sneer at the views of Hobby Lobby's owners. They dismiss them as nothing more than a matter of their, quote, personal disapproval of certain contraceptives. But this isn't a matter of personal disapproval for Hobby Lobby. It's a matter of their deeply held conviction that God himself disapproves of the termination of the lives of innocent human beings, even in their earliest stages of development. Now, the Times tries to hide behind the ruse that Hobby Lobby is not a person, but a corporation, and that a corporation is incapable of religious behavior. Well, then you got to ask yourself the question, why is every Hobby Lobby store in the country closed on Sunday? They're closed because Sunday is the Lord's Day. That sure sounds like religious behavior, I would think, to any objective observer. But the problem here, the fundamental problem here, is that the owners of Hobby Lobby are in fact persons. The owners are in fact individuals who have deeply held religious views on the nature of life in the womb and possess a constitutional right to exercise those religious views in every part of their lives, including the way they run their businesses. Now, I want to be clear here. The right to the free exercise of religion does not belong to organizations. It belongs to individuals. Organizations like churches have free exercise rights because the individuals who attend them possess those individual rights. This is exactly what the Supreme Court affirmed in the Citizens United ruling, that when individuals who have a right to free speech, when they come together and act as a group, they don't give up their individual right to free speech. They can collectively exercise it because each of them individually has that right. So churches have religious rights and assembly rights because the individuals who attend them and who belong to them have those individual rights, because every right in the Bill of Rights is an individual right. It's not a group right, not an organizational right. It is an individual right. Now I'm going to come back after the break and finish up a couple of comments here, but the Times falls into another trap. Well, let me just close the loop on that individual right. Every American has the right to the free exercise of religion. I'll talk about the significance of that when we come back. But every individual American, including the owners of Hobby Lobby, has a right to the free exercise of religion, and business owner does not have to check that right, the right to the free exercise of religion, when he walks into his office on Monday morning. Focal Point AFR Talk will be right back after these brief messages. Stay with us, 888-589-8840.